and welcome to the 7th episode of Coffee with Keira, the exciting podcast where I chat with different people about their careers to teach teens about potential jobs. I'm Keira, and joining me today in the coffee shop is Paul Giuliano. We'll be discussing his interesting job as a technical program manager for the Level 5 Autonomous Vehicle Division at Lyft. See you inside!
I keep your heart beating like a drum, give you that good feeling that you want for everything you're needing. You know I'm the one. I keep your heart beating like a drum, like a drum.
Hey Paul, thanks for joining me for coffee. How has your day been so far?
It's been good. It's been busy. I think I've already had like 6 meetings this morning, so.
Fun, busy? Yeah, I've just been doing school. What's in your cup this afternoon?
All right, I actually have some tea. I have throat coat. Have you ever had that before?
No, what is it?
I forget the mix of herbal, ingredients, but it's one of those ones that kind of like calms your throat a little bit. And I find I need this most days because I'm talking so much, pretty much all day on meetings. And by the end of the day, I'll sound like I have a frog in my throat. So I'm usually sipping on that, if not coffee.
I have Kamado with like Montreal seasoning in it. And
Nice.
To it.
Very nice.
What is your job and where do you work?
All right. So I work at Lyft Level 5. So Lyft is the rideshare company, that we use. The other big one being Uber, and there have been a couple examples over the years. And Level 5 is the self-driving car division of Lyft. So it's largely kind of a research and development branch of Level 5 based out of Palo Alto up here in the Bay Area where I live, and in California. And I am a what's called a technical program manager, so often referred to as a TPM. So a TPM is sort of like a hybrid kind of role where you have a lot of program management responsibilities that any program manager anywhere in any business would have, like executing on schedule and keeping costs low and making sure that problems are being solved. But the T in TPM is really important. Most of us have PhDs or advanced degrees in advanced technology and have backgrounds in that. So we have a lot of technical responsibilities in terms of understanding the whole system, what goes into a self-driving car, and being able to make technical decisions. Yeah. So yeah, that's my current role. Yeah.
You're all very smart.
Thank you. I tell myself that every morning.
What are all the different levels of Lyft? You said you're level 5.
Yes. So level 5, the name level 5 refers to the concept in self-driving cars about the level of autonomy of how well it can drive itself. And so like a level 1 car, right, is something that, or level 0 car, because I believe it starts at 0, is just like, it's just like a car, like it drives, there's no autonomy, like you have to do everything.
Yeah.
And like when you start getting into level 1 and level 2 distinctions, that's like when a car has automated emergency braking, and you're driving, the car in front of you slams, and then your car is smart enough because it has like a little radar on front to like hit the brakes for you and save you from a collision. When you start getting to like level 3, that's when you get into things like a Tesla autopilot. And like I own a Volvo, and Volvo has what they call pilot assist. And it kind of keeps you in the lanes and keeps you, at the right speed. I think that's somewhere between level 2 and level 3. Level 4 is when autonomy is largely making a lot of the decisions, but you still need to have someone in the steering wheel to deal with like crazy environments. And level 5 is no steering wheel. Level 5 is like just no steering wheel. So that's a distinction. So we kind of called ourselves level 5, and with the goal of having fully self-driving.
What are some of the biggest challenges of self-driving cars, like fully self-driving cars?
Oh gosh, there are too many to list. One of the first ones that comes to mind is safety, right? You're largely dealing with people's lives on the road, right? And in typical software development, you can handle some bugs here or there, some missteps. You can just kind of patch it and fix it. But, for example, when we're doing our testing and our simulating of how our autonomy system works, you may have like 1 in a million errors where you like miss a red light, where you think it's green. And that 1 in a million or even a billion errors could mean a death, right? Like if it actually happened in real life, right? And so just dealing with the safety element of it is huge, because things need to be redundant and they need to be validated, and you have to prove and that's going to work. And that largely leans into like one of the next challenges, which is like public opinion and public acceptance of self-driving cars.
Yeah, because I can get my license in 15 months. So will there be cars that are driving me, or will I be able to drive?
Well, so like I think as far as the time scale, you're probably, I don't know, just to be conservative, I would say sometime still in like the next 5 to 10 years, we will have like fully self-driving. But the cars that you might be driving are way more advanced than the ones I started with. I still have my like 1992, Camaro. That is like the dumbest car that I own. It has nothing. But it's funny you bring that up, because like my daughter's 4 and she'll be driving in 2032 or something like that. Yeah. And I don't even know if she'll get a driver's license to drive. Maybe at that point you'll need a license to vote. So.
Yeah. I look forward to driving since I was like 2, so
sure.
I really want to drive. Can you explain what's going on in some of those photos?
Oh yeah, sure. So let's see. So I sent you a handful of photos, and when I look at them, okay. So there's a couple in there that are related to my one of my earlier jobs in space, because I started in the space industry. So I started at Boeing, and then prior to that, I was doing PhD research and academic research in space propulsion. And so one of the first jobs I had kind of in the private sector was running a test lab at Boeing. And what we would do, and so these are the pictures that have like the racks and the big chamber, and it says high voltage, keep away. And so I ran a lab called a survivability lab. And my background's in plasma physics, and plasma physics is when you have ions and electrons, and they create electric and magnetic charges. And spacecraft, when they're in orbit, they experience very strong and intense electron environments. And we would actually recreate that environment in this laboratory in that big chamber. So this was like, I owned this lab, and kind of, I think these photos were me showing off how I recently like cleaned it up, because it was like a mess when I started there. Yeah. And so anything that goes into space needs to be qualified in that lab. Let's see, I sent a couple of me in my bunny suit garb at JPL. Okay. So when I left Boeing, I moved to Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena. And, one of the things that I often did was lead activities in our clean rooms. And so when you're building a spacecraft, you have to be very cognizant of your electrostatic and your contamination environment around you. Yeah. You can't accidentally shock something, like you would the door handle, because the electronics might not like that. And on top of that, like a single hair, that like falls out of your beard or your hair and lands on something electronic, or like falls in the middle of a plug, could like take down an entire mission, right? So
has that ever happened?
Yes, it has, actually. And a lot of those issues were learned early on, like in the 60s and the 70s. And then we kind of figured it all out like in the 80s and the 90s. But you'll find old photos of people working on spacecraft wearing like a suit and a tie with like no protection, like eating or drinking next to it, and there were more failures back then. Yeah. So I put a couple photos. One of them is like my outfit. Every time you walk into my lab, you'd have to go through an air shower and like turn around and it would blow all of the contamination and everything off you. And then the photo of me with my coworker, that's in front of the spacecraft called EcoStress. And I didn't work on that spacecraft, but it was something that was going to be used to monitor the infrared light radiating from plants and other flora around the Earth in order to figure out how dry or wet it is. Let's see, I put a photo of me in front of the Mars rover mock-up, and then also I put a photo, which was like a tag for my Instagram, where the rover actually came to the lab where I was running my team because they had a test facility there. And so I was like 10 feet from it, right? And it was like really cool. I didn't work on any Mars programs while I was there, but there were often times where our programs sort of intersected.
Yeah.
And then let's see, and then I took, I haven't taken many photos at level 5. I took one of me. That was actually my first day at work, where it's just me in front of the sign.
Yeah.
It's for a couple of reasons. And this goes also with JPL and Boeing, how those are kind of like my only photos, because oftentimes in these like advanced technology type jobs, you're not supposed to take photos of what you're working on, right? Yeah. So like, I can't take photos inside our self-driving cars that we would have, because I would jump in every once in a while and you'd go on a route and see what it was like. They'd pick you up in the parking lot. So there's not many photos there, and then any other photos of me at work would just be me like sitting at a desk. So it wouldn't be that exciting. Yeah.
What does a typical workday look like for you, pre-COVID and then now?
Yeah, so it's funny. I've actually been with Lyft now for longer, remotely post-COVID than when I was there in person. I started at the end of last year. And, the days are sort of similar in that a job like mine there's a lot of interaction with people and teams. There's a lot of things you need to do, a lot of teams that you need to do them with, and you're always kind of like, a person in my role is always trying to look at what the next steps are, right? Like teams are working on things right now, but what are they missing? So you have to go and kind of interject and put yourself in certain things and learn. Okay. So a lot of meetings, right? Like I mentioned earlier, I've already had like 6 this morning, right? And a lot of interacting with people. Oftentimes, in the downtime, if I do have time where I'm not like actively interacting with people, I'm typically working on one of a couple different things. One of them would be what the next set of communication is going to be about my programs. So I'm often having to communicate the way that my programs are doing, both down to like the people working, but also up to leadership. And those are kind of 2 different styles of communication. So I'm working on documents that are drafting, progress and statusing and how are we doing with certain metrics and things. And then also a lot of reviewing documents too. So a lot of reading. I'm constantly getting fed things, and in terms of assessment of how they fit into like what we're trying to achieve with our role in level 5. So yeah.
So is it like a typical 9 to 5, and it's pretty similar each day?
It's not. It's not similar in terms of like the content of each day, because the things that happen, because we move so fast with what we're doing, the things that happen every day are different. But I personally try to stick to sort of like an 8 to 6 schedule as much as possible, and it's not possible to do it 100%, right? Like I'm often up at 5 a.m. because I need to like finish some slides or work on something, or answering questions at like 9 or 10 at night because there's just some really high priority thing that has to happen. But just even for my own sake, especially post-COVID, for my own mental health, right? I've tried to be a little more strict about it with myself. Yeah.
Get your own time, no work.
Exactly. Or else, you tend to get burned out very easily when you're always in front of the screen all the time. And
Do you get to travel much for this job?
I don't actually. In fact, none of my jobs really have had a lot of travel, to be honest. With level 5, there really hasn't been, and really wouldn't be much, with the exception of maybe locally within the Bay Area if we're dealing with vendors.
Yeah.
At JPL and Boeing, a lot of what I did intersected with the defense industry. So occasionally I'd be traveling to the East Coast, like Washington, D.C., in order to interface with customers and partners and that sort of thing. It wasn't very regular, but it was enough so that a few times a year I could kind of count on doing that. A lot of my work has been focused on this sort of development and maturing of prototype and advanced technology in order to get it kind of like ready to use. And so I've often been, on the front lines of like in the lab, getting the work done with the team, or building it, or like working with our program management leadership to like do it. I've never had a role that had any sort of like marketing kind of element, and maybe a little bit of like business development where you're working with customers. But a lot of time I'm kind of in the execution branch of what we're doing, which is like there on site working on the technology.
Yeah. I love being like, for any projects I do, I like the hands-on figuring it out. Yeah.
Absolutely.
What are some of your hobbies, and do you have time for them?
I do make time for them, which is nice. I'm easily distracted in that, like, I love a lot of things as far as like, I find a lot of things really interesting and fun. So I'm always kind of like trying to rein in my hobbies, but I would say my most active hobbies right now, especially through COVID times, are I work on my car. I work on my project car, so I'm just slowly restoring it. I find that very fun and kind of like meditative. I love working on electronics, microcontrollers, and kind of pet projects. Like, for example, I have a Raspberry Pi set up as a home server, and I'm always kind of thinking of new ways to use it, and for security and projects, and trying out little coding projects and stuff on it. I like to go to the rifle range, actually. I've done competitive marksmanship, which is really fun. My grandpa taught me how to shoot rifles, and again, it's one of these things where you can kind of nerd out about it, and then you go and you meet up with a group of people, and it's very like meditative as far as competing. And fishing is another good one too. So like, I've been doing less of that, but I have a fishing trip coming up in a couple of weeks I'm really excited for. So those are a few things I always try to like spread my time around when I'm, and I guess the last thing is like video games. If I can squeeze it in and I just need to relax at home, I'll play some PlayStation.
Yeah, we have like a clay pigeon shooting range, like right down the road. So we go there sometimes. We don't do it competitively, but
very cool.
Fun.
Yeah, it's very fun.
Do you enjoy the people you work with, and do you have like a large team or a smaller team?
I do enjoy the people I work with. I think I've been very lucky to have very good and smart and positive teammates in all the jobs I've had, which is nice. I think that generally, let's see the size of my teams. I would say they're on the bigger. It kind of varies as far as team size. Like right now there's probably somewhere like 20 to 30 people who are working on things directly related to the types of activities that I'm managing. Yeah. And they don't directly report to me. It's more of like a program, where it's like I'm sort of like a dotted line on their org chart. And I had a team of about the same actually reporting to me while at JPL when we were actively doing things. But it also kind of, at JPL, I was on a team for a while where there were about 4 or 5 of us, just kind of core group working on something like really fast. And at Lyft, it's been cases like that too. There'll be maybe 2 or 3 people working on something for a couple months, and then you kind of move on. So it kind of varies. Yeah.
How many different like companies are working on self-driving cars? Like, and do you guys like communicate between them?
Wow, actually, I don't even know the full list, but it's actually a lot more than you would think. It's something like 30 or even 40. Yeah, and the big companies are the biggest and probably furthest along is Google's company Waymo. Okay. Waymo, Uber, Lyft, Cruise, which is a company of GM, right? So GM has Cruise also. And then there's just like this whole chunk of also like mid-tier ones. There's like Zoox and Pony AI and like all these crazy names, you know. So there's a lot of them working on it, and there's probably this like upper echelon of the people who are maybe furthest along and have spent the most amount of money and time working on it. And I think we're kind of like at the bottom end of that top tier. And they're all sort of in varying stages of development. No one's solved it yet and has like a truly self-driving car. Everyone's kind of in various, you know, stages.
Yeah. What is the best part of your job?
I think one of my favorite parts of a job like this, I mean, the favorite part of my job right now is the technology that we're delivering. And I think that also maps to the other jobs I've had, right? Like I've always been drawn to applications of technology that are very difficult and advanced that have like really lasting impacts on the world. So communication satellites, military satellites, let's see, at JPL, I was working on exoplanet imaging telescopes. So the types of telescopes that will be in space that will be able to like image, you know, an actual planet, you know, that's like light years away in the future. And then self-driving cars, right? The next transportation revolution, which is going to be able to like move people around so freely and just redefine how cities are designed, right? When you don't need like parking lots anymore. So, that's really drawn to me. So I'm a science fiction geek, you know, and a futurist, and I always like my mind wanders about all that kind of stuff. So actually being able to see the results of it, you know, is really nice.
Yeah. Crazy how far technology's gone.
Yeah. Yeah, really.
What are some of the challenges of your job?
I think, one of the challenges in bringing up advanced technology in general is it's trying to figure out what the compromises you need to make with the end users and the customers in order to still get like the impact and the value they want out of it, because inevitably it's not going to be like the perfect thing that they wanted, right? And you always have to make engineering choices about what the trade-offs are. And so that is always some of the most challenging parts you have to go through, because you have to work with your customers to come to a decision. Well, you're not going to get this, but you'll still get this. And like, is that still worth it to you? The most challenging thing about working with my current job is the balance of wanting to be fast and agile and nimble like a startup, you know, like a tech company, but dealing with all those same complications like I just discussed. The fact that we have like human lives at stake, and the technology is really hard, and you know, we want to be safe and do it right. So that balance is really difficult, because you don't want like too much paperwork and rigor and process, because that just slows you down. But you don't want nothing, because then your system is going to be like patched together with duct tape, and you can't have that either. So that trade-off that's almost like an everyday thing that I'm dealing with.
What is your best memory from work?
One of my favorites was I was at Boeing. For a while, I was in a group where we sort of owned the testing of our high power microwave systems that would end up on the spacecraft. So by microwave system, I mean those are like the communication dishes, right? So satellite communications is wireless, obviously, because you can't just like bring a cable up there, and it's blasted down at microwave frequencies, right? So typically in the hundreds of megahertz to gigahertz range. And so on top, typically on top of the spacecraft, and I call it the top, even though that's the part that's typically pointing down to Earth, right? Because the spacecraft are upside down.
Yeah.
That's where the highest power communication devices are. And we were running a test. It was me and my partner at the time in the team. We were running what was considered one of the final tests on the spacecraft before it was going to like get shipped and like integrated. Mm-hmm. And so they had the spacecraft all like unfolded, and I'm in my bunny suit, and we're in an anechoic chamber. Those are those chambers that look like they have pyramids on the walls that keeps it like really quiet. And it keeps the noise level down, right, for radio frequency systems. And I'm on this device, which is like, it's on a scissor lift, but it's a platform, so you can like lay down on it, right? And it's used for typically technicians and engineers who need to get like in close. So I'm strapped onto this what do they, the diving board, that's what they call it. I'm strapped onto this like diving board thing, 30 feet in the air, over this like $5 billion spacecraft. And I have this like probe that I'm like holding with two hands and like trying to like get into this one spot so that we could make a measurement. And I'm just like looking all around. I'm like really focusing. And then I just look around. I'm like, holy crap. Like not very many people get to see this. This is like lots and lots of money and lots of time. And I just remember like just thinking like at some point this thing's going to be in space, and it's just like this is the most expensive, craziest position I've ever been in my life. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So I've looked at your LinkedIn profile and seen like all the places you've gone and worked. But can you describe the path of how you wound up pursuing this career?
Sure. So I started, like I mentioned before, in more the academic side of things, and I really loved what I was doing. I studied plasma physics and aerospace engineering at Michigan. And, when I was finishing up my PhD, you kind of have to like make that decision of whether or not you're going to stay in academia or go into the private industry or do something else. Mm-hmm. And I realized that it was multiple things. I wanted to come back to Los Angeles, and I also wanted to get into the private sector. So when I started at Boeing, I really started getting the taste of like what it meant to actually deliver like products and things that are going to go into space, right? And over the course of my time at Boeing, I think I worked on, it was something like 21 different flight programs that went into orbit. And I really enjoyed that element of it. And that kind of was very consistent through Boeing and JPL, is that I got very interested in like, you're working with the team to come up with the idea, you develop it, you deliver it, right? And then you kind of assess how it works, and you do it all over again. Just that whole process I really enjoyed, way more than maybe like being in my own lab, like just working on something, like at the bench, So I really enjoyed that. And I think the path that it ended up taking when we were moving to the Bay Area, I decided self-driving cars might be a fun, maybe detour, maybe I'll be here for a while, I don't know, and maybe go back to space. But I realized like the path of delivering and like executing on really fun advanced technology products and things was really like my theme at this point in my life. And so I made that decision kind of incrementally. It probably wasn't one instance, right, that I can count on, but the more I saw more senior coworkers who were making some of these decisions and like what their backgrounds were and how they had so much insight into how these products would work, I realized like that looked like a fun job path that I kind of wanted to go down that program and product leadership kind of role. Yeah.
So if I go back a little, you said there's like a decision you had to make between private and, I didn't quite hear the other word. What's the difference?
Or academic. So it would basically be like, do I want to be a professor? And I could have gone the route of, you go and you be an assistant professor somewhere and you're writing grants and you're very independent. It's all based on your work, right? And then eventually get promoted and get tenure and all that. And I don't know, it just, when I was kind of trading it off, I just decided I wanted to go the other way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you always wanted to be like, have you always been interested in space and all of this when you were a kid?
Yes. Yeah. So that has been pretty consistent in that I've always been interested in space. I've been reading science fiction like my entire life, right? So like those two things combined the space sector sort of was a natural
Yeah.
direction for me. Um, in going back, so I studied like astronautical and aerospace engineering, and if I could do it all over again, I wouldn't change the path, but I would probably study something like electrical engineering, just because something that I didn't know, because I didn't have a whole lot of direction, in choosing a lot of this. I kind of like just made my own path. I thought electrical engineering was like working on circuits and that kind of stuff, but actually electrical engineering is needed like in literally everything, that we do, because it's communications and it's lasers and it's, electronics and circuits and software and all that. So I've had to learn a lot of electrical engineering things just along the way, because everything I've worked on has some sort of electrical engineering related aspect or computer science related. So
if you hadn't chosen this career, what would have been your next choice?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I still think it would be fun to be a professor, and do that element of it. If I was to kind of go back to that decision point, when I was in grad school making that, I still think that'd be very fun, and I would enjoy it. Okay. I don't know, actually, when I was younger and I was trying to figure things out, kind of at the beginning of college, I was very interested in going into law. I was interested in intellectual property, and I always thought that the kind of engineering background would be fun to have, with like paired up with the legal background. So yeah, that's another one that I remember kind of thinking about when I was younger.
Where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years?
I think probably in a similar type role, as far as working with some sort of advanced technology type company. Could be Lyft. It could be back in the space industry. I think there's enough problems to work on that I can kind of be sufficiently busy and have a lot of fun for the foreseeable future. And yeah, it's something that you're always thinking of too, is if you have any unique ideas of your own that you're interested in pursuing. So, I don't have much of an entrepreneurial background, like in the classical sense. Never tried starting my own company or running a startup or anything like that. But I'm always kind of keeping it in the back of my mind in the next decade, if there would be something that would be fun to pursue, as far as, if it would be successful. So yeah, that's kind of how I see it going.
For anyone who is interested in pursuing a similar or the same field of work as you, do you have any words of advice?
Let's see. So in getting into any type of advanced or technology that's like vehicle related, whether it's self-driving cars or spacecraft, aircraft, that kind of thing. One thing that I used to tell my students when I was a professor and I was teaching like freshmen and they were trying to kind of like get their bearings, is the practice and the development of systems engineering. Okay. The idea that you don't really learn a lot of this stuff until you either go to grad school or you start working, that has to be a lot of rigor behind how all these complex things fit together, right? And what the total system looks like. And getting into fields like this and having kind of an earlier understanding of systems engineering is really valuable. Because it kind of forces you to start thinking outside of the box, outside of your own like expertise and what your major is. And if you're younger, even in high school, thinking about just like, the one thing, like when I was younger, I was very specifically interested in like just rockets, and like things that like made spacecraft go. But I think I would have benefited a little bit in understanding less about just like rockets, but more about the full system of how things work, because I think there's a rich set of interesting topics in there that I think it might have been nice to get exposed to earlier, and kind of broaden your knowledge. So systems thinking in general and systems engineering, I think is a really valuable way to think about it. And then in my particular fields, like you typically need an engineering or a science background. And one thing that I often tell younger students who are interested in kind of getting into this is to, people are often asking a way to like kind of stand out, and like how do you like actually go there, because it's like this chicken and egg thing where you like need experience to get an internship, but you need an internship to get experience. And I'm a big fan of thinking of your work that you do in both school and in your personal life with sort of like a portfolio mentality, where just putting a little bit extra time and even into your side projects and your personal things in terms of like writing up what you did and documenting and like just a little bit of extra time and like organizing it can go a huge way, because then you have like this portfolio of things you've worked on, and that adds a lot of value in terms of having something that you can show and like learn from.
Well, that's very helpful for me. So I can start writing that down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you for joining me for coffee. Your job is incredibly interesting. Cheers.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching. See you next time on Coffee with Keira.